Of dinner plates from stoneware clay is one of the most practical projects you can make on the wheel. And getting the proportions just right is a skill you'll learn right now on DIY's Throwing Clay. Bill Van Gilder's been working at the wheel for more than 30 years. Throwing clayware that's attractive as well as functional is one of his specialties.
One of the most useful things you'll make at Potter's Wheel is a plate. And I'm going to make 3 sizes: a small plate, a medium, and a large. To make them match as a set, I'm going to use a design element of a wide rim, and I'm going to follow it through on all 3 plates. The first thing we've got to do is get some clay ready.
To make a set of 3 plates, you'll need 9.5 pounds of very soft clay, bats, 2 soft rubber ribs, a wooden rib, a ruler, a needle tool, a pointer, a cutoff wire, a trimming tool, some wax emulsion, and glazes.
To make these plates, this wide spans, it's impossible to pick them up off the wheel head and set them onto a wear board. So we use a bat. Now this wheel head doesn't have bat pin holes, which would help us adhere the bat to the wheel head. So I'm going to show you another method. I'm going to throw a flat pad onto the center of the wheel and stick the bat to the pad. Now these grooves create a little bit of a suction or a vacuum, again, that help adhere the bat to the wheel head. Now I'm going to start with the smallest of the plates. That gives us practice as we work our way up to the larger dinner plate. This bread and butter plate uses 1.5 pounds of clay. The softer the clay, the easier it is to pull the form outward.
Using the right kind of clay for your project is essential. Bill's put tips on clay selection on DIYnetwork.com.
Now, because I'm going to trim a foot in the bottom of the plate, I need some extra clay down there. So the thickness of the base of the plate at this wet stage is 1/2 inch thick. How do we know that? Take your needle tool, push it into the plate, run your thumb down the tip of the needle till it's touching the clay, and check out the thickness. That's about 1/2 inch. Now, one important fact about making plates. The spanch of the plate appears to be flat when it's finished, but in actual fact, we make it in a shallow curve. As the plate dries, it shrinks and rises up, creates a hump across the plate. If I make it into a curve, when it rises up, it finishes very flat.
Before forming the rim, Bill measures the bread and butter plate. It should be 7.5 inches across when wet. It will dry to be about 7 inches.
The next step is to form the rim. What I'm going to do is I'm going to pressure the clay from the outside up towards my left fingertips, sandwiching the clay in between. I'm going to use the groove between my fingers to create this inner step, or this inner edge of the rim. Then I'm just going to lightly pull the rim outward into a fine taper. After you remove the water from the form, the last thing I'm going to do is use this soft rubber rib to smooth the inside and to smooth the rim of the form. And on my pots, I put a little swirl in the center. It's just a place for your eye to focus later on. All right, one more thing. I'm going to take a wooden rib. I'm going to take the pointed end, cut a small groove underneath the plate, or a bevel. That's a place to catch the wire. And you know, it's really easy for these wires to rise up as you pull them beneath the plate. By cutting that groove, you avoid that happening. Now let's pop the bat up and make the next plate.
When DIY's Throwing Clay continues, Bill throws 2 more plates to complete the set. Welcome back to Throwing Clay. Bill is making a set of dinner plates. First, he attached a bat to the wheel head with a pad of clay. Then he threw the smallest plate, a bread and butter plate. Using soft clay, he opened a very shallow bowl shape to make the plate. When it was 7.5 inches across, he formed the rim. Then he smoothed the inside with a soft rubber rib, added a decorative swirl in the middle, and cut the plate free from the bat. Now he's ready to throw the next plate.
I'm going to add a little bit of water to this, just enough to make it tacky. So we're now going to use the 3.5-pound piece of clay to make a 10-inch lunch plate. As I draw the clay outward, I'm going to relax my hand pressure, the downward pressure. That creates the inner curve that I need to make a flat plate. Now here's where I'm going to take my first measurement. The next step is to establish the rim. I'm going to take this wide piece of clay, flatten it, and slowly pull it outward. Not quite parallel, has a little bit of lean to it. Now the depth of my plate from the rim edge to the plate base is about 1/2 inch also.
Bill takes a final measurement before finishing the plate.
Now I'm going to use the soft rubber rib to smooth and level the inside of the plate. I'm also going to use it to smooth the rim. Clean everything off with a sponge. And like the small plate, I'm going to put my little swirl in the center.
Using the tip of his wooden rib, Bill cuts a bevel at the base of the plate. Then he separates the plate from the bat with a cutoff wire.
Now here's a little technique I use often. I want to make 7 more plates exactly like this one. How do I do that? 3 things. 1, use the same weight of clay for each plate. 2, when you're using tools, use the same motions on each plate. And 3, set up a pointer. I put a lump of clay on the edge of my wheel tray. I'm using a chopstick as a guide for the next plates. That's a target where I'm going to aim the rim. Now I'll make a large plate. Let's make this pad real tacky again. And I do that between each plate. Center the bat and connect it to the clay.
Bill uses 4.5 pounds of clay to make the largest plate. It'll be 11.5 inches in diameter.
That looks pretty good. Thickness is right, so let's open it up. Use plenty of water.
Bill creates the rim by stretching the clay between his fingertips. Now he's ready to finish the inside surface.
Now for this large plate, I'm going to use a larger rib. I'm going to support the flange or the rim on the outside as I draw the rib across and into the rim. And one final measurement. Remove the excess water. I finish off with my little swirl. Set the pointer. Cut a groove below. Now the very last move I make before I wire cut the pot from the bat is I flatten the rim just a little bit more. It's very soft and very fragile at this point, so it's a very light touch. Let's wire it from the bat. We're going to let them set up until they're leather hard, and then we'll get them trimmed.
Welcome back to Throwing Clay. Master potter Bill Van Gilder is making a set of dinner plates. He started by throwing a clay pad that he used to attach the bats to the wheel head. Then he threw 3 plates, a small, a medium, and a large plate. He used the same technique to throw each plate. First, he centered the clay and opened it up, creating a very shallow bowl shape. Then he formed the rim by stretching the clay between his fingertips. He made the base of each plate a 1/2 inch thick so he can trim a foot in the bottom of each plate. Then he smoothed the inside surface with a soft rubber rib. Finally, he put his signature swirl in the center of each plate. Then he set the plates aside to dry. Now that they're leather hard, Bill can trim them.
First thing I'm going to do is make a pad on which to trim the plates. We've got to make the pad larger than the largest plate. Now I like to use a clay pad to trim plates. They'll stick to this tacky surface. If I used a foam pad, they'd slide all over the place. I'm going to cut a couple of what I call keyholes into the pad. This is a place where I can put my finger to pop the rim of the plate up and off the pad when we're finished trimming.
Bill makes one more adjustment to the clay pad before trimming the largest plate.
Let me use the tip of my knife. I'm going to create some grooves. These are centering grooves. These help me when I lay the rim onto the pad. I want to attach the plate securely to the pad, so I apply a little bit of pressure at the rim. Now we're ready to trim. Before I do that, I want to explain something. I have a curve inside the plate. I'm going to follow that curve on the outside of the plate as I trim it.
Bill presses down lightly on the plate as he trims away the excess clay. He wants an even 1/4 inch thickness throughout.
Another couple important points. Use a really sharp tool and a plate that's really leather hard. There's a step right here where the flange drops into the plate surface. I'm going to imitate that on the back side by creating a little step which mimics the inside step. Now I've got to cut this inner part away. I'm going to establish a thin line which is going to create the foot rim of the piece. Now I'm going to trim from center to the foot ring. Now we created the base of this plate 1/2 inch thick. I'm cutting away about 1/4 inch from the foot ring to the center of the plate. And now use a soft finger to smooth this edge. This is the edge that's going to sit on the table. A smooth edge means no scratches on your tabletop. I'm also going to create a waxing guide mark right here on the outside. That'll be useful later on when we apply wax in the glazing process.
With a damp sponge, Bill smooths over the trimmed surface. Then he signs the plate with his chop or signature stamp.
Lift it up and away. Looks pretty good. Now, notice that I trimmed the largest plate first. See all these little crumbs? If I did the smallest one first, this whole pad would be covered in crumbs. I put the next larger plate on, it would be sitting on the crumbs, and that I don't want because it would ruin my rim. So I trim the largest plates first down to the smaller plates.
Bill follows the same steps to trim the medium and small plates. First, he removes the excess clay, following the inside profile of the plate. Then he creates the step at the rim. Next, he establishes the foot ring. He trims 1/4 inch from the base of the plate. Then he smooths the foot ring with his fingertip. Finally, he cuts a waxing guideline. To finish, he wipes the trimmed surface with a damp sponge and signs the plate with his chop.
I make a final cleaning of the rim just by using the crevice of my thumb over the rim. Make sure you set it down onto a clean board. It can be the same board the plate was made on, but it's got to be clean of any crumbs. And our small plate is last. Now these keyholes that I made aren't deep enough, so I'm going to recut them. Now I'm going to trim this small plate exactly the same way I trimmed the large and the medium plate. Okay, that's our 3 plates trimmed. We'll wait till they're bone dry, put them in the kiln for their first firing.
Next on Throwing Clay, the mysteries of cones, circles, and kiln temperature are revealed. Welcome back to Throwing Clay. Bill is making a set of dinner plates. So far, he's thrown 3 plates, a small plate, a medium plate, and a large plate. He left the base 1/2 inch thick on each plate so he could trim a foot. Then he stretched the rims between his fingers to give the plates their shape. Once they were stiff leather hard, he inverted the plates on a clay pad. Starting with the largest plate, he trimmed the underside to mirror the interior profile. He cut a foot ring in each plate and removed 1/4 inch from the base. The plates are now bone dry, so Bill loads them into the kiln for their first firing. The kiln will fire for 10 to 12 hours and cool for another 24 hours before Bill can unload it.
We're going to get some color or some glaze onto our plates now. I've been doing some glaze testing. I made these little test tiles. I fired them in previous kilns. I came up with this glaze called nutmeg. Next one is cream rust. Sort of has a nutmeg color, but a white background. When you cross the two over each other, I get this third very subtle color, which when put on a plate, gives me another color other than the cream and the nutmeg. But before we can put glaze onto the plates, we're going to apply some wax onto the bottoms of the plates. I'm also going to wax a round circular area in the center of each plate. That prevents this low point from ever sticking to the kiln shelf.
Bill elevates the plates on a cylinder to apply the wax. He uses 2 types of brushes.
The point of this brush will get into this corner inside the foot. Then I'm going to use this foam brush to make the center circle.
Bill waxes the other plates the same way. Now that the wax is dry, he's ready to dip the plates into the cream rust glaze.
I'm going to put it in at an angle. It's going to create this sort of odd surface area up at the top, this line. That's what I'm looking for. We'll do the large plate next. And now we'll do the small plate. Now, in between glazes, I'm going to remove any of the excess glaze that is adhered to the wax. This is what potters call fettling the pots.
Bill swaps out the cream rust glaze for the nutmeg glaze.
Also, don't forget, we're making a set of 3. So my movement, when I put the plate into the glaze, for each plate is exactly the same. I put it in, give it a slight twist back and forth, and bring it out. And again, I'm going to clean the excess glaze off the waxed area.
For the glaze firing, the kiln will heat up to 2200 degrees Fahrenheit over 10 to 12 hours. Some potters use temperature cones in addition to the computerized control on their electric kiln. Steve Lewicki of L&L Kilns introduces this tried and true method of judging temperature.
They allow you to see exactly what's happening in the kiln, and some people use them in addition to the controller to get very, very precise measurements of what we call heat work. And heat work is the amount of heat that goes into the ceramic. The cone starts like this, which is straight, and then when it's perfectly cured, it's like that. If it's like this, it's just a little bit too much, and if it's like this, it's a little bit too little. They come in different cone levels. For instance, most bisque is fired at cone 05 or cone 06, and many glazes are fired at cone 6.
To learn more about how to read and interpret temperature cones in your electric kiln, visit DIYnetwork.com. Danny McLaughlin, a veteran potter from Morton, Minnesota, relies on temperature cones for precise temperature readings in his wood-fired kiln.
It tells us exactly what the glaze is doing in the kiln itself, and the reason why we know it's doing the same thing is the cones themselves are made out of the same materials as the glaze. They're designed to melt at increments of about 25 to 50 degrees. So in this kiln, we want cone 10 to go down. Cone 10 represents about 2350 degrees Fahrenheit. The cones are consistently made to melt at the exact same temperature every time we use them. So it's dependable.
Firing in a wood kiln can be tricky. It takes skill and vigilance to achieve the right results. Denny uses clay rings in addition to temperature cones to judge the progress of his pots inside a wood-fired kiln.
The rings are probably one of the simplest and oldest ways of really judging what the glaze is doing in the kiln. We make them out of the same material as the pots themselves and glaze them with the same glazes that are on the pots. The reason why we use more than one way of judging the temperature and the condition of the clay is because the more information that we have, the better we are at judging if we're doing what we really intend to do in the kiln. The cones tell us temperature, the rings tell us immediately what the surface is doing. So the more information we have, the better we are at judging if we've achieved what we want to achieve with the firing.
Now that the glaze firing is finished and the kiln has cooled for at least 24 hours, Bill can unload the plates.
Setting a table isn't a chore when I'm using handmade plates. And cleaning up is easy because these plates go right into the dishwasher.